I just finished my very first puff quilt, you guys, and I learned so much along the way, and I'm going to share all of my tips in today's video. A big thank you to Crafter's Edge for sponsoring today's video and blog post. To make the puff quilt, you basically need to create these small little pillows, which are called puffs. For each puff, you need 2 pieces of fabric, a pattern fabric that's going to be on top, and a smaller piece of fabric that'll be behind and it's never seen in your quilt. You want to line these 2 fabrics up and start stitching along one edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You want to pause in between and now take the other bottom tip and line it up along the edge of the smaller fabric. So this will create a nice mountain in between. You want to fold that fabric down. You can fold it either towards you or away from you. I prefer folding it towards me. You then want to turn your fabric 90 degrees and repeat. The first few puffs, I pinned all of my fabric in this position and then I started sewing. But this method where you don't pin the 2 fabrics together but just fold it along while you're stitching on the sewing machine is much faster. We do this for 3 of the edges, leaving the 4th edge open because we want to fill this in with some filling, which creates that nice beautiful puff. Today I am die cutting all of my fabric squares using the Crafter's Edge crossover to die cut machine. You first need to place down the cutting plate. On top of that, you place this metal sheet that helps cutting fabric. Lay down your fabric on top. Today I'm placing 2 layers of fabric, and then you place your die on top. I'm using a square die here. And then you finish off the sandwich with the top plate and run it through the machine. I love that you're able to cut not 1 but 2 layers of fabric at once. You can easily cut multiple layers of thinner fabric, and every time you have a perfect square. Now that I had all of my die cut fabric ready, I just kept sewing. Instead of filling each pillow or each puff individually, I found it easier to stitch 2 of them together and then fill them. So I would lay 2 of the puffs right side facing together and then sew them. And I used a 5/8 inch to sew the puffs together. This way you don't see the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here's how it looks with 2 of the puff pockets sewn together. They don't line up exactly perfectly where the fold is, but that's totally fine because once you stuff it with the polyfill, you don't really notice that at all. So once you've stuffed the insides of these puffs, we want to connect these to 2 more puffs that we've sewn together. You can of course pin these into place, which I did for the first few of them, but the faster way to do them is to just line up again using your sewing machine and start sewing with a 5/8 inch of a seam allowance. Stop in between and then just fold the puff closed. Same thing, you just want to line it up to the bottom fabric, fold it, push the fold towards you, and then make sure that when you line up the top fabric, the juncture of where this puff and that puff meet is in line, and then just stitch it all the way. The quilt does take a few extra steps to finish, but it is so adorable and totally worth the time. You also make sure to grab a big bag of polyfill because you're going to need it. Once you have that part figured out, it becomes very easy to start joining them and making little blocks of fabric like these. These pillows are so cute. I just had so much fun assembling them. So now for the back of my quilt, I'm using a cotton fabric. I used half of this, so it's about 1 yard of fabric, and then I just placed all of the puffs that I'd sewn on top of it to make sure that I had enough of them. Then you want to sew all of the puff columns together. This has to be done a little slowly because this is a thick and bulky fabric now. And then you just place the quilt top on top of your backing fabric, which is the navy blue fabric, and then you either tie it in place or do any kind of quilting. I simply used 2 strands of white thread and I sewed a simple knot, tied 2 knots together and clipped it off. On the back of the fabric, you see like these really tiny white marks, and that's it. That's all that's holding the back to the front. The last step is to just trim off the fabric that's excess and hanging out, and then finish the quilt. To bind the quilt, I used some fabric remnants, and then I hemmed it all into place by hand. The best part is the way it is so soft and cuddly. It would make a perfect gift for a baby or a young child. Let me know in the comments below what you think of it, and I'll be back soon with another video. Till then, happy crafting, friends.